Welcome to the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. I am Rich Maletto, a.k.a. Fantasy Bosco, where you can find me on the Xbox machine, joined, as always, the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only, Sean Engel, who you can also find on Twitter at SeanE247. We like to spell Sean the good way around here, S-E-A-N. Sean, what is going on, my friend?
Rich, a lot of business going around in my part of the world, I guess you could say, and just keeping up with all this NASCAR news and all the rumors, the silly season discussion, these races themselves and how they've been going. There's been a lot out there, Rich.
Lots of that going on with the silly season. This is probably the most fun, interesting, intriguing silly season we've had in quite some time. And it's not just involving drivers, teams, we're getting the whole gamut. Normally it's a driver, it's a crew chief. It's typically, even good, busy, silly seasons, we're typically just talking drivers, maybe sponsors, maybe crew chiefs or other team members. Rarely were we getting as much conversation about manufacturers, charter buys, teams closing, drivers going other places, drivers coming up. This is craziness in what's going on right now, man. And in fact, I'm having such a hard time keeping up with it. I need you to help me out with what promos we have going on at fantasyguru.com, because I can't lie to you. My plan of attack is simply this. If you're into football and you want the whole football data, awesome. Do yourself a favor. Sign up before you do, but click on the all-in package, the one that gets you all our data for every sport everywhere. Contact Ted via support at fantasyguru.com. I'm stealing this from Jeff's show, so you can say Jeff sent you. Go to support at fantasyguru.com. Tell them you want to do the 50 off special, but that only works on the entire complete package, okay? But here's the deal. With the 50% off, it's the same price as the football package. They get you all the football stuff. So you get all the football stuff and everything else for the same price you were signed up for the football stuff for anyway. So I highly recommend it. Like, that's, if I was doing anything, and I used to, that's what I would do. Do the 50% off on the whole kit and caboodle. Otherwise, we've got our MVP promo still going on. $40 get you 12 months, right, Sean?
That's correct.
All the stuff we do. I know NBA, I know hockey's ending, but guess what? You'll get the full season next year. Get you
college
everything
basketball, PGA, MMA, soccer, and of course, racing.
Racing, yep. And hey, we did pretty good on the Indy 500. We may have to consider a few more IndyCar bets over the next few months here, Sean. Just a thought.
Yeah, maybe I might consider throwing my hat into that ring a little bit too as the season goes on a little bit more, if I get some time to study up. So that could be some intriguing thing we could kind of throw our little heads around into.
Yeah. Hey, IndyCar's got some fun things going on, man. And next year it's going to be a lot easier to watch with things going to Fox. So I will not be shocked. I'm old enough to remember back in the day where there was a battle of what was the better racing series in America, NASCAR or IndyCar. And IndyCar kind of dominated the forefront for a long, long time. And they kind of, after the whole split, we don't need to get into that. Things kind of dampered down. But anyhow, hey, go to fantasyguru.com. This podcast is brought to you by the Elite Plus Network and fantasyguru.com. Check the subscribe button. We have all the different options. There's a package for you, I promise, depending on what you want. Like I said, if you're like me and you want it all, I'm telling you that's the way to do it. Contact support. Sean, I have to give you a shout out this week. Last week's show, you specifically led off right away when we talked about the upcoming race. Tires were going to be a problem. And I was adamant, shouldn't be that big of a deal. Once we get some rubber down on the track, we hear this every year with the new pave, it should be fine. I was flat wrong. And I don't know exactly what happened, because I tell you what, I don't think the teams expected you to be so right, Sean, because we had 5 blown tires in Cup practice alone. We had blown tires in Xfinity practice. We had blown tires in the Xfinity race. We had blown tires in the Cup race. Tires were everywhere. I don't hate it, but I screwed up, man. I dropped the ball. So hat tip to you, sir.
Yeah, well, I thought after our guest last week, which, by the way, if you want to go back and listen to last week's episode, we had Jerry Jordan of kickingthetires.net on there.
.net.
Yeah, .net. There you go. And he was talking about the track conditions, and that made me start to wonder if tires were going to be a thing, and that then he was mentioning he wasn't too sure. But, when you only have a partial repave, you have that mixture of, repaved rubber and the rubber that isn't paved, you could say. You
New
could
track,
think
old track.
yeah.
There's a mix there. Yeah.
Something's just not going to gel with the tires was my thought. And I was just trying to see if I can get a sense of that. Turns out I was really onto something there.
You were absolutely onto something. And like I said, shame on me, but guess what? Shame on the NASCAR teams too, because apparently they downplayed it as bad as I did, because they should have had way more information than I did. And it didn't seem to help them much. In fact, we had high hopes for a couple of drivers, one of them being Christopher Bell last week, and he was one of them that blew a tire in practice. So,
yeah, crazy stuff. It was a bit of an eventful weekend from the two races, but you know what? Let's get into it, Rich. Let's actually turn our attention towards the Xfinity race first. There, we'll go in weekend order. So the Xfinity Series race, it was chaotic, real chaotic.
It was great. I thought it was a great race, man. I mean,
it was an entertaining but chaotic race.
Chaotic for sure, but from an entertainment standpoint, I thoroughly enjoyed that race. And I hope the next gen car gets the package figured out, because the Xfinity cars showed us what this track is capable of.
Yeah, for sure. It ended up with Sam Mayer actually ending up winning, but not without frustrating the heck out of Riley Herbst through earlier contact and through racing him at the end of the race. And Riley, he showed his displeasure by getting into the side of Sam Mayer and cutting his tire on the cool-down lap after the race was over, and then talked about his frustration in the post-race interview there, Rich.
I like Riley. Cool your jets, bro. You're frustrated. We know you're frustrated. But guess what? Your team kept telling you, take the inside. Winners win from the front row, and you insisted on going to the inside on the front row. And we had watched, the folks in the booth had mentioned it. That was not the place to be. And I give you props for hanging it out there, but there was a lot of rubbing all the way around. It's short track racing. I personally did not see Sam Mayer do anything. I will be the first to admit that he drives over his skis at times, but I did not see a single thing during that event where I was like, Sam Mayer, what are you doing? Riley, on the other hand, he about cost both of them on one of those restarts when he got up into Mayer anyhow. So Riley, and in all fairness to Riley, he was very cautious about how he said it. He made it clear he was frustrated, but he did not really cross the line. He made some snide remarks about, I'll get apologized to, whatever, he'll do it again. Look, Mayer's an aggressive driver. We've seen that with Ross Chastain. I didn't have a problem with it. I will say this. After his practice times, I wanted no part of Mayer. Mayer is a lot like how we've talked about Corey Heim, in my opinion, where there's enough tenure with the team, enough knowledge and chemistry with the driver and the crew. We better be real careful, because Sam Mayer, we talked about it a month or more ago on this podcast. Of all the JRM cars, that's the one that had the most speed. Allgaier's been near the front doing well, but Mayer's the team that's really shown speed, and then kind of Brandon Jones did for a bit. I think we got to keep Mayer in the conversation for one of the best drivers on the circuit right now. And he talked that he's frustrated he's not getting his name mentioned more with NASCAR rides. And while I think that's a little premature, I mentioned it in Discord, Sean, Sam Mayer is here to stay, and he is a legit contender at this level, at the very least.
Yeah, and I was actually looking this up about Sam Mayer and his more recent success in the Xfinity level. I was reading that within the past 28 or 29 races or so, he's been the driver that's actually been tied for winning the most Xfinity races there, Rich. He's won 6 of them in that span, which the only other driver there that even tied that mark is a driver that's in the Cup Series now, John Hunter Nemechek.
I would say John Hunter, I bet. Yeah, that makes sense. Look, JRM has produced Cup drivers, Noah Gragson, Josh Berry, and while neither of them have set the world on fire so far, they are both 2 big names, and we talk about silly season, that keeps floating around with other opportunities, and a name that you see people whose voices we appreciate in the industry, whether it's some of the TV announcers, those in the garage. Those are 2 names that keep coming up that people are hoping to see in big name organizations. So, there's been a lot of flack Sam Mayer's taken over the years. I've been one of the first to kind of defend him, saying, look, there's talent there. Just let him hone it a little bit. It's kind of coming to fruition, man.
It truly is. And Sam Mayer, I think he's getting to the point where his racecraft is finally getting honed, cleaned up, and it's showing on the track there overall with his success. And now he has multiple wins even this season now to show for it too, just like last year.
And a win at a race where the crew chief openly admitted they changed just about every single thing in the car after practice because they were so bad in practice, which is just like what we heard about Corey Heim 2 weeks before in the Truck Series.
Yes, that is very true. Speaking of Corey Heim, he actually scored his career best Xfinity finish this weekend of third for Sam Hunt Racing there, Rich.
Which was also Sam Hunt Racing's best finish. I'm pretty sure it's their best Xfinity finish ever, but if not, it certainly was for this year.
Definitely was the case.
And, Joe Gibbs, the team that dominates everybody, you want to talk about a chaotic and mixed day. Joe Gibbs had a rough one, and it was a whole bunch of things that played into it. I was disappointed in Brett Moffitt, but he had trouble. And the unfortunate thing was because they set qualifying by points, he kind of figured they were going to be in the back anyway. He was worried about qualifying, but felt like they had a top 3 car. I think they did. It didn't. When they got caught that lap down, it was just a problem. They got it back.
Yeah, he still ended up finishing 1 lap down, however, but at least he didn't have the day that JHN had there, where Nemechek finished 9 laps down after crashing late due to contact with, his teammate Sheldon Creed there. Creed and Chandler Smith, however, they both had good days. Both of them ended up in the top 10 by the end of the Xfinity event there, Rich.
Yeah, they did. And like I said, Moffitt had a car that could be there. I don't remember if it was a tire cut. There was something that happened early on that they were just battling back. I mean, I don't think they got up any higher than 18th throughout the race. That was unfortunate. Look, John Hunter, I don't know if he's frustrated because of what's going on in Cup, but man, him and Ty Gibbs, this is 2 weeks, back-to-back weeks that they both have looked like clowns in the Xfinity series. And I say that lightly, but with the wrecks and the responses from it, I mean, I don't have a lot of patience when you wreck into your own teammate.
Well, really, the whole thing between Nemechek this week was just a racing deal between him and Sheldon Creed, whereas Ty Gibbs last week, he just got caught up in that whole mess at Sonoma and then lost control of the car right there.
Yeah, but then he went back and did something stupid with it. And I know it was a racing thing this week, but when you're teammates, you shouldn't put yourself in those situations is kind of where I'm at. Like Richard Childress says, I don't care what you do. I want you guys to race hard. Just don't wreck my cars. And
it's funny. We mentioned about teammate incidents, and you mentioned Sheldon Creed there. We got to remember last year when him and Austin Hill got
him and Austin
too.
Hill. Yes, they did. But as RCR cars, which we've already talked about Austin Hill. He's been making enemies everywhere. So you can't deny the personalities right now in the Xfinity series, at least in my opinion, supersede the personalities we have in Cup. It really does. There seems to be more honesty, more passion, and maybe it's because these guys are fighting for jobs more regularly, but we heard it in Riley Herbst's interview. We heard it with Sam Mayer afterwards. We heard it in Creed and Austin Hill earlier this year. We've heard it with numerous Cole Custer and Austin. I mean, it keeps going and going. So I stand by. Some of the best racing in the country right now is in the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series.
Yeah, can't help but agree with you right there. You mentioned about Cole Custer. We mentioned his teammate Riley Herbst. Cole Custer ended up having a good day overall, too. He was 6th by the end of this race. So Stewart Haas Racing, both of their cars finished 6th or better this past weekend.
Yes.
In Xfinity.
And that's right. And that's a good thing to see. We needed to see that. And, to kind of cap off the Joe Gibbs stuff, Chandler Smith dominated the event. I mean, we kind of buried the lead here with him finishing 8th. We mentioned, him and Creed finishing in the top 10. But for all intents and purposes, we thought Chandler Smith had this race won until the last 2 sets of pit stops.
Yeah, Pretty much. Chandler Smith, we keep talking about him at these shorter tracks. He seems to be finding a bit of a niche with being really strong at these types of races. Remember, he won at Richmond earlier in the year as well, and that's the second time he won at that track overall in his Xfinity career so far. He seems to be catching fire within these shorter tracks there, Rich.
Yeah, and he's looked good at some of the intermediates too, but his background is definitely short track racing, which in all fairness, a lot of these guys who come up through ARCA and whatnot, that is their background, right? We're going to talk about Carson Guapo later, and he falls in that category. I'm not shocked to see him do well on short track, struggle on some of the intermediates, especially since you can't even drive the intermediates in NASCAR till you're 18. So Taylor Gray, for example, we talk about in the truck series, he's had multiple races in NASCAR at these shorter tracks, but some of the intermediates, it's a whole different story. Although Joe Gibbs has had such good equipment at these intermediate tracks, I won't be shocked to see them running, back up front again there.
That is true. Now, we get into some of the lap leaders there. We mentioned it before. Chandler Smith, he led the most laps, 131. Sam Mayer, our winner, led the second most, 47. John Hunter Nemechek ended up leading 35. Justin Allgaier with 14. Ryan Sieg with 8. Both Jeremy Clements and Riley Herbst had 7 laps led, and then Josh Williams led 4 laps there overall.
Josh Williams is just sneaky on these short tracks, man. He really is. Like I got a little note for him in the article this week that for DFS, don't sleep on Josh Williams this week.
Yeah, he's got that Kaulig racing equipment, and although they haven't been as strong as past years, we know that the type of driver that Josh Williams is, and he's shown it a few times this year where he's able to just claw and grind his way into a solid finish, and that's happened on a number of occasions, especially at short tracks this year.
Yep, it has. It's fun to see. Really is. Chandler Smith won both stages. No shocker. Like I said, we thought he had it won. And Nemechek we thought was going to be in the hunt till he got into trouble and all that. So some standout finishes. Hey, Sammy Smith with another top 5, Sean. I feel like they're JRM. Don't count out these JRM guys before we get to the championship playoff races here, because it feels like they're kind of crescendoing in the right direction. Matt DiBenedetto, who was 2 laps down at one point. I have no idea how they got both laps back, and he finished in the top 10. That was some great strategizing.
With his best finish of the year, too.
Yeah. Well done. Ross Chastain, we said it. We weren't loving the equipment, and the equipment wasn't there. Now, Ross didn't really show out in the Cup race either, but a 9th place finish, an okay top 10 for the team. I was more impressed with Daniel Dye's 10th place finish. He looked good out there. He ran in the top 10, top 15 all day, ran in the top 5 at one point. There's another guy where, if you watched ARCA, Gibbs, Heim, and Dye were constantly names, and Herbst, really, were constantly names you heard all the time running up front. It's good to see that happening there for Daniel Dye. And it was a sharp-looking car. I know we didn't talk about it last week, but you highlighted it in our notes. The race against suicide, I believe it was.
Yeah, and his paint scheme this past weekend was actually a rare case of a throwback scheme, not on throwback weekend, because he was throwing it back to Rusty Wallace's 1994 scheme in Cup.
The black and yellow Miller Lite car, and it did look good. So hat tip to Dye. Parker Kligerman had 11th place finish, not bad. Ryan Sieg, he just quietly keeps finishing in, near, around the top 10, top 15. Something to note for DFS especially. Led laps, as you mentioned earlier today. Leland Honeyman, hey, we pushed him. We talked about him. That was nice to see the 13th place finish for him. Ryan Ellis, another solid. Man, it's so hard to get a feel for Ryan Ellis and the equipment over there with Jordan. It is Jordan Anderson, right?
No, he drives for Alpha Prime.
Alpha Prime, my apologies. It just seems to be up and down. Anthony Alfredo, again, he's another one. A top 15 finish, great 15th. Just kind of tough to get a vibe on. Your boy, Joey Gase.
Yeah, Joey Gase. That's one of his best finishes of the year right there. I mean, considering that equipment, sometimes you just see it several laps down or in the back of the field. He ended up getting almost a top 15 finish out of this race weekend. So impressive run for him right there.
David Starr, coming out of retirement, if you will. I mean, he's got to be one of the oldest Xfinity drivers out there any given week when he does race. 17th place finish was pretty solid, I thought. Brett Moffitt, I was disappointed with that 18th place finish. Like I said, they just never, after they had that challenge, they just never were the same. Kyle Sieg, 19th. Josh Williams, I had higher hopes for Williams, but, 20th is what it was. And Dawson Cram matching his best finish of the year in 22nd, which I don't know what to do with Dawson Cram. I really don't.
I want to say that part of it is the equipment because he's with JD Motorsports and they're not like one of the top end teams. But I do also see, though, that Dawson Cram, with his results overall, he's been kind of all over the place. So even seeing him even sniffing the top 20 right here is what's considered a very good day for him.
He overperformed with the equipment, I would argue, right? Like, I don't think we expected that equipment to be top 20, right? I think that's a fair statement. So
yeah, I'd say it's top 20 only depending on the track, because there's been times where, say, Garrett Smithley has been approaching the top 20 on, say, a road course event or certain short tracks or so.
And I would argue, too, that when Smithley has done that, he's also overperformed. He's done better than what the equipment probably should be doing. There's another driver. You've noted him multiple times when we talk about him hopping in rides that he's worth noting due to his skill set in general. So overall, I thought it was great. It was fun to see that the guy that dominated ended up, in 8th and not, second or third. I feel like that shows that things happened in the last few stages of the event. So that was fun to see. The Cup race. Is this the best short track race we got of the year so far, Sean?
Well, I'd say it's between this or Bristol, really, but this was actually, I'd say, shockingly so, a decent race.
I would agree. And the funny thing is, we just named 2 tracks, and what was the common theme at both tracks? Tires. Tires not holding up, right? So, I mean, there's something to be said about finding a way to force these teams to manage their tires and the drivers to manage them. That makes it a better show. We talked about it after Bristol. We know the answer now to the puzzle. It's a matter of how do we get there, right? Was the new pave the reason the tires were such a problem? Because we haven't seen the tire be a story at any other short track this year. Bristol, excluded.
The only other one that even had any sort of mentions about tire experimentation was North Wilkesboro, but that's just because of the whole option tire thing just being experimented with.
And it was terrible. I mean, it didn't work at all. Like, Logano led all the laps. So
except one.
Except for one.
Brad K was that one that got away.
Yeah. Because he pitted. I mean, let's be real. He had to come off the track. It's the only reason he wasn't leading the lap, right? I mean,
there you go, Rich. There you go.
Ryan Blaney did lead the most laps and win, and he had the dominant car. It was still a good show, even though he had the dominant car. So props to Blaney. He did hold off William Byron, Chase Elliott. In all fairness, Kyle Larson looked like he was going to be the car to beat, or he at least had one of the best cars out there. And, as my buddy says, well, he's either wreckers or checkers. That's fair, but over the last year-ish, about June, July last year, we started to see a lot less of this with Kyle Larson and a lot more of this. Both the last 2 incidences, I don't put on Kyle Larson. It wasn't him being overly aggressive or pinching somebody in the wall. You can call them racing incidences, and that's fine. I don't disagree. But he wasn't the culprit that led to the dust-ups, if you will.
Well, as far as this weekend is concerned, the cause of his undoing wasn't directly Larson himself. Even though what was interesting was that who got into him, those two did get tangled up together at one point earlier in the race, which I found interesting.
Yes. Although Larson was quick to say, I don't blame him. I'm not, he wasn't overly upset. So, but it did take their day. I mean, it ruined their day. He finished 34th, I think, 35th. He was definitely near the back.
Yeah, maybe 36th or so, I believe.
And this was worth noting. Toyota's been pretty good at these short flat tracks. They really weren't this weekend.
They just did not show up at all, whether it was Gibbs, whether it was 2311, or I guess Legacy Motor Club, even though they haven't been showing up most weeks this year.
I was to say, do we even count them? Let's just pretend LMC is like a football team, like soccer football. They're kind of on the back burner. Jimmy Johnson, if you want us to start talking about your guys, you need to start getting some production on the track. Until then, you will be known as the soccer team that's playing in NASCAR.
That's one way to put it.
But no, Toyota, Christopher Bell was the only top 10 finisher. And really, both you and I loved him going into the week. I think the tire blowing in practice, I think that completely scared Toyota, scared Gibbs, did something. They were either pushing the tires too far on pressure or camber or something. But I think Bell's blown tire threw up red flags for the whole team.
Yeah, although Bell, he ended up being the only Toyota driver there. We mentioned that he's the only one to have finished inside the top 10, and then he's also the only Toyota driver that even led laps in the Cup race this past weekend. If you want to go back towards the next Toyota driver, you have to go back towards the very end of the top 15 with Martin Truex Jr. right there, who really struggled throughout a good amount of that race and just made it there by the end of the race into the top 15.
Which I got to give a hat tip to him because they qualified horribly.
Even so, he still ended up finishing a lap down, but that's just because he got lapped at the very end when he finally got back onto the lead lap within that last run.
But they fought back, that's for sure. As you pointed out, we only had 14 drivers that finished. I'm sorry. On the lead lap, right?
Yeah.
Only 14 drivers finished on the lead lap. That's not a lot, man. I mean, that was very common years ago in NASCAR. We're not used to seeing that this year. Bristol, we saw stuff like this. Ooh, another short track with tires. Maybe how many cars on the lead lap is not directly indicative of a good race. Just a thought. I know that's been a criteria NASCARs like to use, but I'm starting to think maybe that's not good criteria.
Makes you wonder.
Stage winners, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson. Look, they were the best two cars all day. No surprise there. That's why we said it was a little bummer for Larson overall, who still is near the top of the leaderboard, even without an entire race. Gosh darn those waivers. Ryan Blaney led 201 laps, the most he's ever led in a Cup race, and won. That's a dominant day there, my friend.
Yeah, we've seen dominant days out of Blaney, but he hasn't closed it out with a win like he did this past weekend. He made a statement win right there.
Well, and we should have probably pushed him a little harder. I know I did a little bit in the preview article. It was his home track, and he was very proud about that his mom's near the area. His dad peekabooed up out of the wall when he went to go to collect the flag. There was, again, when it comes to NASCAR, I'm all for betting stories. Had I known that was a home track, and shame on me for not, I don't necessarily know where all of the drivers' parents are from. So, little slack, but had I known that, I would have said, hey, this is a story to follow. It's worth watching, especially after we saw qualifying. I mean, his 16-1 odds pre-practice and qualifying were just silly and stupid. Obviously, after we saw the race, right? Kyle Larson led 80. Hey, talk about Josh Berry, man. Josh Berry at one point there was a lot of hype as this race was finishing up with Josh Berry up front.
Yeah, he was having a pretty strong performance all throughout the day, running it in the top 10 for a good amount of the race overall, too.
I could be wrong, but I think the contact on the yellow flag, I think that screwed up the nose of the car.
Yeah, I think it's certainly plausible there that happened.
Because after that, he was not the same. But that's another Ford. We keep seeing a trend here lately. Toyota, Ford. Exactly. Alex Bowman with a nice finish in 8th. Josh Berry did finish in 7th after leading 32 laps. I'm sorry, I'm skipping here. Chris Buescher led lap 16. Bell led 7, as mentioned. Brad Keselowski led 5. even Ricky Stenhouse, who was a heck of a value play at 6,000 this week. I know we talked about him on the pod last week.
You mentioned him actually as one of your picks to watch.
Yes.
So good on you for mentioning that.
Thanks, man. So that was happy. And you could tell his interview after the race, you could tell he's got a little more pep in his step. Daniel Suarez led 4. Congrats on getting your citizenship, but bro, you got to start stepping up your game in the car right now because there's a lot of people looking for jobs. Just saying. Chase Elliott led 1, but Chase Elliott is now at the top of the point standing after finishing 3rd, I believe it was.
Yeah, he was 3rd behind Blaney and Byron overall, and he inherits the points lead. And I was actually seeing this statistic earlier that now through 17 races, this is the best average finish that Elliott has ever had in his Cup career so far.
He's been quietly really good the last 8-9 weeks, man. I mean, I posted it on the article. Out of the last 13 races, only 3 weren't top 10 finishes. 1 was 11th. 1 was 24th, 1 was 33rd, but one of those, I'm doing it from memory. I may have gotten that wrong. But one of his worst finishes was Talladega, which you and I will basically just throw out.
The last time he even finished outside of the top 15 was at Coda this year.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
And that was a 16th place finish. He still finished top 20 in every single Cup race so far this year. Absolutely insane.
Including Dega, including the wild cards. So,
yeah.
I tell you what, man, this whole Chase Elliott ain't the superstar, blah, blah, blah. Tell you what, man, if you want to bet anybody right now, of course, I don't know what his odds are. They probably have climbed too much. He would be a solid bet to win the championship that I would think would have some lower odds just because he hasn't rattled off the wins. The Kyle Larsons, the Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bells are probably at the top of the board for odds. Elliott might be a sneaky little bet right now.
Yeah. Let me see. I'm actually going to look this up real quick.
Go ahead and look it up. I'll go through these finishes.
Got it there. So, plus 1,000 in order to win the title.
10-1.
Yeah, 10-1. He is the 6th highest driver on the board.
Right. Ricky Stenhouse finished 5th. Joey Logano 6th. Josh Berry 7th. Alex Bowman 8th. Suarez with a nice top 10 and 9th. Keselowski with another top 10, 10th. Chastain, they seem to be just off a little bit there, man. 11th. Todd Gilliland, hat tip to you, sir. 12th. Feel like you're coming around a little bit, man. That was a Sean Engel special right there.
And just to mention this about Todd Gilliland, too, he's now finally approached the top 20 in regular season points, and he's starting to slowly slip into the playoff conversation there a little bit, too.
Justin Haley with another top 15 finish in 13th. Dude, I don't know why this guy, you and I talked about it last year. I do not know why this guy wasn't until now. Apparently he's a hot commodity. We'll talk about that later. But up until this point, he hasn't been, and I've never understood it. I feel like he has done nothing but way overperform the equipment he's in. Doesn't make any sense. Carson Hocevar 14th, Mark Truex, battle for 15th, Noah Gragson 16th, Bubba Wallace 17th, Chris Buescher, a little disappointing in 18th, Austin Dillon in 19th. I don't even know what we're doing with Austin Dillon at this point, man. He's got to be frustrated. Harrison Burton, as sad as it sounds, the 20th place finish is one of his better finishes this year, it feels like.
A rare top 20.
Yeah. Tyler Reddick, what is going on, my friend? 22nd. Denny Hamlin, ouch. 24th. Ty Gibbs, ouch. 25th. Chase Briscoe, buddy, 28th. Not ideal for that last group there, man.
Yeah. The Toyotas just did not have it this weekend. And I know some of them was due to certain issues overall, but man, they were just completely off.
News for the week. We got some crazy new news for this week, man. Should we lead off with the biggest news that we dropped or heard drop today?
Yeah, the big one here. Gene Haas. He's keeping one Cup charter and his 2 Xfinity Series teams for a new team known as Haas Factory Team in 2025. So he's keeping one Cup Series charter. He's still keeping the 2 Xfinity teams. this is big right here, especially for the speculation surrounding silly season and all the NASCAR free agency going on, Rich.
So officially, Front Row has one charter, right? Unofficially, we believe the other two charters are spoken for, but nothing has officially dropped yet. So we were kind of waiting on the fourth, and now the fourth's taken. It's kept. So now we just got to wait for news on the other two charters as far as officially, because I don't think we're going to get news on too many driver moves until we get that at this point, outside of whoever's taking over the 19.
Yeah, because the according to different sources, and I know Door Bumper Clear, they mentioned this on their podcast this past week, that 19 car is apparently now spoken for with Chase Briscoe.
Chase Briscoe, right. That's my understanding. But I also read recently that he has multiple offers and it's still not official. I have already locking him in the 19 because of the people who have dropped the news on it. They rarely, it's like Adam Schefter in football. You might as well just go ahead and put it in pen. It's happening. So I'm with you. I think the 19 is going to Briscoe. I think that's a done deal. So now we really got to get to the nitty and gritty on this. And I don't know that we're going to get any clearance or clarity on these charters until we get a NASCAR deal. I'm at the point, Sean, I'm worried we're not going to get a NASCAR deal.
Yeah, it's just you wonder what is it going to take for the deal in order to finally finish up? There's just been so much negotiation, so much different tactics being played. It's just still been going on even until this present day. You just can't help but wonder, what is it going to take there, Rich?
And the teams have openly said, representatives for the teams have said, look, boycotting, we do not feel like is an option because we feel like NASCAR will just carry on. And I will remind folks of a story from the 70s. May have been the 60s. Think it was the 70s. There was talk about the drivers unionizing. And this all stemmed from a safety concern regarding tires. And they talked about pulling out of a race, I believe it was at Talladega.
That's
right.
So
they said, we're not racing. NASCAR said, cool. NASCAR went into the stand, said, who wants to go fast? And they were going to put whoever in the cars out there. They said, Richard Petty, David Pearson, we don't need you. People are here to watch cars go around a track. We'll put cars on the track. So I don't necessarily disagree with the teams. I understand their frustration because this whole sticking point on part of it anyway is NASCAR wants the opportunity to buy its own charters and be competitors in the series. I know we do it in other series. I don't like it. I don't like Penske and IndyCar doing it. I made my voices, or I made it known at the time. And look, there were significant penalties, and Penske had to go above and beyond with their own suspensions. And I think it was for optics because it's going to look shady when your top team is caught cheating and it's owned by the same guy that owns the series and owns the biggest track in the series. You can't have that. Jeff Mance talks about this with betting and everything else. The moment these series have integrity problems, we can gripe about beating on women and getting in fights and all this other crap that is not acceptable. But the bottom line is, until integrity is in question, the sport continues on. Fans continue to be there. But when the integrity is on, you can't verify it, you lose everything. You lose credibility and then some. So I really hope we hear something, Sean, but I don't know, man. I really don't. We're just going to have to keep following, connecting dots for these drivers.
Yeah, that's very true as it is. But who do you think is lined up for these next few rides there? And let's think about this Gene Haas ride. Who do you think is going to take it?
So, I mean, do we assume one of the four? Okay, three, because we assume Briscoe's going on. Do we assume one of the three drivers left at Stewart Haas takes that role? Or since Joe Custer is now in charge, do we see Cole Custer come back and take that car?
I'm thinking it's Cole Custer's going to end up taking that just because the Haas sponsorship right there.
I think so too. And to be fair to Custer, look, he's done everything he's been asked to do in the Xfinity series. I mean, he is consistently one of the top guys every week, every race. So, I mean, if you're looking at it from that standpoint, my challenge is he had a shot. He had a shot with that team and it didn't work. Why? Now, in all fairness to him, till recent, like last 3 weeks recent, none of the cars for that team have really been spectacular, right? I don't know, man, because I think my sticking point with trying to figure this out is we don't even know who the manufacturer. Can we assume it's going to continue to be Ford?
Well, if we're just going to think about it in terms of the Xfinity team, I think Ford would want to at least keep them just because
Right.
we don't have a lot of big Ford teams. The biggest Ford team outside of Stewart Haas Racing in Xfinity is RSS Racing with their 4 cars.
Right. And they're nowhere near. We could at least argue Stewart Haas, if they aren't 1 or tier 1, they're tier 1A, right? As far as Xfinity cars go. I mean, we could put Joe Gibbs at 1, but here again, we saw this week that they weren't all that. And it was JRM and Stewart Haas that were really the ones battling for the win. So from my perspective, I put JRM, JGR, Stewart Haas kind of in that top tier in Xfinity. So I'm with you. If I'm Ford, I don't want to lose that. I've already have a shortage of teams in the truck series. I don't want to lose what I've got representation on in the Xfinity series. So let's assume it is Ford. What does that look like? Right? I mean, is Zane Smith officially at front row? Is that a done deal?
Well, this all depends. Let's just say this. We think that Trackhouse has one of those remaining Stewart Haas Racing charters. They're going to decide who gets that third charter, most likely between Zane Smith and Shane Van Gisbergen. And right now, I'm thinking that SVG is more likely going to end up getting that ride just based on his Xfinity performance this year. So where does that leave Zane Smith? He's either going to have to go to a different team or he's going to have to go to Xfinity, maybe aligned with Kaulig where SVG currently is, and maybe spend a year there until he gets another ride, perhaps. But I do think, though, with front row, because we know that Cole Custer was initially one of the front runners in order to maybe potentially get one of those rides before this news broke out. But now if we're thinking Custer is going to go to this Haas team, well, that opens up 2 seats right there. I think there's a pretty good chance that at least one of the remaining Stewart Haas drivers there. My money, I think I'm leaning towards Josh Berry being one of the drivers as it is to take one of those seats.
Fair.
If Zane Smith is available, there is a chance he could end up going back to front row. If not, I think it could potentially be maybe a Noah Gragson in the other ride.
See, I got to believe Noah's going to, I feel like he's earned a ride more so than the rest, right? Just because new to the team, the 10 really was always kind of the afterthought at Stewart Haas for a long time. And early in the year when there wasn't speed, they were the only ones doing well, right? I feel like he's earned a spot. And, we haven't talked about this because Corey Heim, while a Toyota guy, is signed to do some Trackhouse races this year. I got to believe 2311 has that other charter, and that's one of the drivers they want to bring up.
Well, regarding the 2311 charter, I've heard mainly 2 different names being attached to that ride. And you mentioned one of them being Corey Heim, but there's also, I've heard there's been some concerns that they're wondering if Heim is not going to bring enough sponsorship in time. So with that in mind, you know who the other driver I've heard is, and I'm not sure you're going to like this name as much, Riley Herbst.
I don't necessarily disagree that Riley probably deserves a shot, but this goes back to the model being broken, okay? Corey Heim way overperformed in that Sam Hunt machine. Corey Heim, when filling in, he is already listed as the backup driver for 2 Cup teams, okay? And when he was called on, he did better than the guy he was subbing for. So my problem with this is it's a travesty that he is not a shoe-in in a Cup ride at this point. And honestly, if I were him, I wouldn't do it for anybody that's not a top ride. You've got Joe Gibbs at Xfinity to fall back on. I got to believe they do not want to let him go. I know that Ty Gibbs, and Heim don't get along, so I'm not shocked that JGR doesn't necessarily want to bring him along yet. But I got to believe that Gibbs is also, JGR Gibbs is looking down the road here because how much longer is Hamlin going to run? Let's assume Briscoe goes to the 19. Bell's not going anywhere. That's their captain, if you will, assuming Hamlin were to retire, okay? So Ty Gibbs is not going anywhere. So who is it that they bring in? I would argue Heim would have been the next one to bring in line. If you thought Hamlin was going to retire after next year, for example, let him run Xfinity next year and have that spot. Because of the beef with Heim and Ty Gibbs, I don't know that JGR management really wants to do that.
No, from what I've heard, they're trying to not get Heim over at JGR because of the past history between Heim and Ty Gibbs overall. That Toyota's trying to look to see if they can maybe eventually get him either in a 2311 seat
Right.
or maybe at a seat at Legacy, perhaps. Not a seat at JGR while Ty is there.
And see, if I'm Heim, I'm telling Toyota, Legacy, Soccer Club, go F yourself. No. 2311 I can get on with, and that's why, man, I will cry if Heim ends up at Legacy over, I don't care who. I mean, I want to see Carson Hocevar do well, but that team, it is laughable to me, Sean, that I have more respect for Rick Ware Racing than I do the Soccer Club at this point.
It's crazy, but that just goes hand in hand with how Rick Ware has basically turned their reputation into a completely different direction this year with Justin Haley overall driving that car. And you know what? Speaking with Justin Haley, let's just get into this while we're on the subject. So Justin Haley, he was interviewed this past week by several reporters. He basically was asked, with all the different talk around you potentially going to other teams, what's happening with you? He said, "Oh no, I'm staying at Rick Ware Racing. Rick Ware gave me a chance at a multi-year deal. I'll stay with him for as long as he wants me, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, or whatever." So Haley, he straight up said he's committed to Rick Ware Racing right now.
Which, props to Haley, because that's the same type of integrity we heard from Kyle Larson back with Chip Ganassi. Even though Larson had opportunities for better equipment, he says, look, the only guy that didn't make me bring money was Chip, and I'm staying with Chip. Haley, I appreciate the integrity. I appreciate the loyalty, but brother, you deserve some fast equipment, man. And I would at least hear out the deals. I wouldn't want to do Rick Ware wrong that way, but look, Haley, I think, is a different talent than what we're used to seeing or expecting from him. I'm fine if he can take Rick Ware to top level, competition. I just don't know that that's really realistic, but hey.
And then there's always the element that another team could just simply buy out his contract and then just take him right there. Basically what happened between 2311 with Reddick right there.
Right. And I could see somebody wanting to do that, right? I mean, I do think there's enough scuttlebutt. And, we didn't talk about the 21 car, but I feel like Harrison Burton's probably a lame duck. And the 2 car and the 21 cars, guys, Cindric, I don't see you go anywhere. I know you got that 1 win, but you better start showing some speed because you have not been good, man. And Burton, we're celebrating a 20th place finish, bro. I mean, my video games, I quit if I'm finishing in 20th. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think that 21 car is going to have a new driver more than likely next season. But who I think this whole Gene Haas announcement might potentially help, perhaps? And this is just speculation. I haven't heard anything on this yet. But maybe this could potentially help somebody like Ryan Preece maybe up his chances of maintaining a Cup ride. Because we kept talking about Ryan Preece as perhaps the odd man out of Cup within all the SHR drivers. If we're going to have, say, Cole Custer join a ride in that new Haas team, and then we're going to have 2 of the, let's just say theoretically, we have Josh Berry and Noah Gragson both join front row. Then we have Riley Herbst decide to maybe take the 2311 ride because the monster, her energy connections and the sponsors he's bringing with Terrible Herbst. Well, that 21 car, if they get rid of a driver, I mean, they want to have somebody that maybe has Cup experience, perhaps. Ryan Preece is open, especially with Justin Haley now saying, because he was one of the drivers being discussed for that ride, according to rumors, that with Haley now staying over at Rick Ware, maybe Preece might finally have a home in Cup and still be able to go on.
Preece would be a perfect fit at Wood Brothers. John Wood has talked about this. Yeah, we want speed, but we also want someone that's not going to cost us a bunch of money, i.e. wreck a whole bunch of race cars. They want a Paul Menard, right? They want a guy that if it's a 15th place car, he finishes 15th. If it's a 10th place car, he finishes 10th. And he's going to, finish races, right? So I think that's a really good call out, Sean. I think that would be a perfect fit.
Yeah, I just think overall that with the narrative kind of building up as it is, It might end up being in favor of Ryan Preece because we all thought he might not even have a Ryden Cup this next year, but
Agreed.
It could open up right in his favor.
Well, let's talk some paint schemes. We both love the driver that we'll talk about later in the show as well, but we both love this paint scheme this week, man.
You know what? Since we're already teasing it without getting into the full context, let's get into the full context of this one. Bubba Wallace's DraftKings paint scheme. Look at this thing, man. This looks so cool, looks sleek, and it looks fast. There, I set the line. It looks fast.
It looks fast. It does look fast. And hey, the guy driving it's been fast here the last couple of years.
That is for sure. And I like that they integrated the DraftKings colors there, the orange, the green, the white, the black. It's a nice mixture of colors, and it's a very simple paint scheme, but I also love the little D with the crown that from the DraftKings logo being right next to the number there. I like it when different sponsors include their logos next to the number like that and make good usage of the space overall like that, Rich.
Very good point, because they got it in both the quarter or the above the wheel well. I'm so old, Sean. I love the fact when we have sponsors that I can support. I love you, Carl Edwards. Who the F is Eris? I don't know if I had an Eris modem or not. Maybe we had one at work. Maybe we had one at home. I didn't have to buy them. The company told me what we had. We use DraftKings, Sean. We cite their odds. We cite their pricing. We play on DraftKings. I love the fact that we've got this sponsor, the gambling aspect, the fantasy aspect coming to the sport, and it's all for us to see, right? I love it when there's sponsors in NASCAR that I can support. So I'm all on board on this one, man.
Yes, sir. So with the draft from the DraftKings card, you mentioned a few names within that past statement there, Rich. One of the names that you mentioned there was Carl Edwards, actually, which is very interesting of you to note, considering that another sponsor that he drove for at one point also has a paint scheme that's returning this week. Let's just get right into it, because this is one of your picks, Brad Keselowski's Build Submarines Red Sox paint scheme.
Dude, I just love the fact that it's got the Red Sox logo and the 6 that looks like the 6 on the jerseys, right? They're in Loud, New Hampshire. They're in Boston country, right? I love it when they do this. We've seen the back in the day, the Washington Redskins theme, right? I miss seeing the Navy and Army themes, to be honest with you. So I dig it, man. And it has that special RFK little red, I don't know what you want to call it there at the bottom. The hood leaves a little something to be desired. It almost has that old school look, but I dig the side view of the car with the number and the Red Sox.
Yeah, the number and the usage of the Red Sox logo is probably my favorite things about this car, especially with that number font there. Really a big fan of how it looks on the car and how they use like you said, the side of the car, I think, is the best part of this car overall, with the usage of the sponsor space and the colors overall. So it's not a bad looking car. I actually was considering this among my choices as well there, Rich.
Well, let's hit your other choice, man.
All right, so this is a new paint scheme this week. We just talked about him in the context of silly season a little bit, but it's Ryan Preece's new Mohawk skin. This is a very, very simple paint scheme, but I find it to be very effective. The number placement is very well done. The sponsor space is not exactly the biggest, but it's used very effectively, especially on the side of the car overall. And it's a simple blue-white paint scheme with red numbers. I mean, you can't go wrong with that combination, Rich.
No, it looks sharp. It looks sharp. Well, should we get into the upcoming race this week where we get to see these cars?
Yeah, let's get right into it. Previewing New Hampshire. We got the Magic Mile on dock here. So,
well, and I want to caution everybody, because if you guys notice, especially for like the Xfinity race, it's a little late start time. Loudon, New Hampshire, the Magic Mile does not have lights. They will never get lights. It was an agreement signed with the city. So I'm a little worried, because there is rain in the forecast, And Sean, you know as well as I do, this race always seems to have rain in the forecast.
Yeah, that is usually the unfortunate thing to deal with sometimes. But you mentioned about the darkness thing. This is something to mention here that Bob Pockris of Fox Sports on Twitter also mentioned, that NASCAR for this weekend, starting this weekend, they adjusted the rule on darkness this year to now officially designate a time when races would end if a race is going to get called early for darkness. So the rule states that once a time has been dictated and once that time is hit inside the race, the next flag will automatically be the white flag and the following lap will be checkered with no overtime regardless.
Okay. I don't hate it. I just hope that time is fluctuates based on the sunset. You know what I mean? Like, don't be setting us at 7:30 and then we've got daylight for another hour and a half for 2 months of the season. You know what I mean? But I don't hate this. Anything you can do to at least set expectations for fans of what they can do. But here again, they also are the ones to say, as Jerry Jordan pointed out last week, hey, we won't start a race unless we think we can get the whole race in. Yeah, that's not true.
It's at NASCAR's discretion, and we saw that before on more than multiple occasions. Let's not forget, Chicago, they changed the length of the race mid-race there.
That's right. They did. I forgot about that because of the dark. I forgot about that's probably where they stayed from. They're like, oh, we don't have lights at Loudon. We got Chicago coming up. We better figure this out. Well, there you go. Notable starters this week for Xfinity. The aforementioned Garrett Smithley. He'll be in the number 4. Amari Williams in the number 6. Patrick Emmerling in the 07. Mason Macy in the 14. Alex Bowman in that Hendrick 17 car, worth noting. I'm going to butcher this name, Sean. Justin Bonsignor. He is in the Joe Gibbs 19. Christopher Bell in the 20. Look out. Does anyone have a prayer, Sean?
I'm telling you right now, you get Christopher Bell, who's going to be driving for one of the best teams in the Xfinity Series at a track where he is currently undefeated in 3 starts. He's won all 3 of the starts he's made at New Hampshire Motor Speedway in Xfinity equipment. And then you just go forth and also mention the fact that Christopher Bell, and you want to talk about success at New Hampshire, he is the epitome of it just because he's the only NASCAR driver to have won a race at New Hampshire in trucks, Cup, and Xfinity.
Now,
Absolutely insane.
Some of that's out of his control just because of the timing of it, but that also is a testament to how good he has been every time he comes here and how good he's been coming up through all the series, right? There's a reason Christopher Bell is -110 for you folks out there wanting to bet. I'm waiting for qualifying or practice or a live bet, or if you want to do what our boy OG Snacks does, OGB Snacks, hat tip, use it as a free bet to turn that faux money into real money, I can sign off on that. But I struggle. Sean and I talked about it pre-race. I really struggle betting -110 odds for a winner when there's 30 some other drivers on the track that can cause chaos. I mean, heck, if you would have asked me at -110 halfway through the Xfinity race last week, I would have been Chandler Smith. Just put $10 on it and collect your $9, and that would have lost.
Yep, but all the circumstances just line up. If Christopher Bell gets comfortable in that Xfinity car once again at a very quick rate, watch out.
My thing is, as long as he avoids trouble and there's no pit stop fiascos, that's where I'm at. I'm not even worried about his comfort level or anything else. I'm more worried about things outside of him and the team's control. Murphy's Law. That's where my concern comes from and why I hate betting minus odds. Corey Heim. Hey, I love him. He did great in Sam Hunt last week, but Corey Heim had incredible success at the last track. I know that it was kind of repaved, but he had great success there. So I felt like he had a leg up on other people because we didn't do it. There hasn't been a ton of racing there in general. I'm not as hopeful for a top 3 finish this week, though, Sean. I'll be honest. Glenn Reen in the 35, Jay Buford in the 74. I'm very curious to see Mr. Carson Bopple again.
Oh, yeah. Carson Quapple, I think, is the other really big name that we have to take a note of this week for Xfinity regarding the part-timers.
For sure. And Nathan Bird in the 92. For Cup, we got Kaz Grall in the 15. Kaz has actually run well here, kids. Flat track, tight turns, road racer, kind of jives well. I'm kind of curious to see Ty Dillon in the 16 this week. His pricing is so cheap, I may use him for DFS.
It's something to consider, but I think it's qualifying dependent for me with Ty Dillon. If he qualifies a little too high for my liking, I'm going to say he's a flat-out fade.
That's fair. That's fair. I struggle with flat-out fades at this point because I've learned from our boy Mark Hogan, all that means is it's a really good contrarian play because nobody else will do it. And I have been burnt by too many of these contrarian plays that I'll fade. Dean Thompson comes to mind, you jerk. But other than that, I don't really disagree. When I say I might use them, it's a might. We got to wait to see how it plays out. But I have enough faith in the equipment. He has some history. If he qualifies 28th, might be worth a shot.
Yeah, perhaps. Maybe if he'll finish around that starting position, wouldn't be the worst play in the world now.
Well, if he qualifies, see, that's where it's contrarian, right? Let's say he qualifies 15th and finishes 17th. He would have been a really well paid off contrarian play because his price is below $6,000, right? So that's why I told Ray and Fincy, I'm struggling doing fades anymore because literally I was doing fades and they were biting me every week. And Dean Thompson was one of the biggest ones. Every week I'm like, use him, crashes. Every week I'm like, fade him because he qualified too well. He doesn't crash.
But even so, I still think that there is potential in Ty Dillon. The two finishes that he's had this year in that call, like number 16. Richmond started 33rd, finished 29th. Texas, even though that was partially due to all the different wrecks that happened that got him there in pit strategy, he started 36th and finished 16th.
Okay, so here again, if he qualifies back near 30, he might be worth that spot, like you said. At the very least, you expect him to probably finish in that 26, 27, 28th range at the very least. So, hey, if you like what Sean and I are saying, please hit the like, subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Please go to fantasyguru.com, click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Look at the packages, check them out. If you're not sure, hit us up on Discord. We'll be more than happy to help you. Or, better yet, email support@fantasyguru.com. They will put you on the right stuff, I promise. Let's get into our top price drivers to watch this week, Sean. I mean, I'm stumbling and struggling here, folks, because it's a complete overlap with me and Sean. Like, I don't know how Sean wants to handle us.
Let's just discuss about the 4 drivers in question here, because I mentioned 3 drivers and you were like, I don't disagree with the list. I like that list, but there's one other driver I'd add. So let's just talk about the 4
That's
names.
fair.
Christopher Bell, Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, and then you wanted to bring up Joey Logano. How about you talk about Logano first there, Rich? What in particular has you on him right now?
Well, like I said, for some reason, in the back of my mind, I hear loud and I think Logano. And I went back and looked, and the man's been very good there. One of the best percentages for top 5s, top 10s of all the guys, even with multiple wins. He has multiple wins. Nobody has more than 3 wins. He's got 2. So does Brad Keselowski. Him and Brad's numbers are very, very similar. Not surprising. They were teammates. Then you mix in the fact that Paul Wolfe went on record saying they've got a whole ton of confidence coming into this week. When the crew chief, like Paul Wolfe, starts telling me that, I tend to listen. When Rodney Childers and Paul Wolfe says things like this, okay, they don't make things up. Like, it's rare that we hear these guys say this and they're flops. Like, that doesn't happen. These guys don't open their mouths and say these things unless there's something that they really... Dude is looking forward to this week. His odds seem out of line. So I'm all for Joey Logano. If you go to fantasyguru.com and check out the overview article for the week, I go into some great details and stats on Joey Logano to help kind of give you the background picture. But honestly, he deserves on the same conversation as the other folks in that list, right? Truex has 3 wins. Keselowski has 2 wins. Sean, we can't have a discussion and not mention Martin Truex's absolute utter dominance the last 2 years. No, it's only 1 win into the 2 races, but he led 426 of 602 laps. The man led 70% of the laps in 2 races. To your point, the next highest was Christopher Bell at 43 laps. And then Sean went so far as to point out, if you go all the way back to 2021, if you combine 3 years of races, no one even led 100 laps.
Other than Truex.
So, I don't know. Brad has the best percentages, like 43% top 10 out of all the events he's run here, and that's including the down years with RFK. His top fives, I believe, is around 30-some%. You said it best earlier. Tell us about it. Why is this Brad's track or a Brad type of track?
Brad usually excels on a lot of these flatter sorts of tracks overall, and we've seen it a couple times even this season. But he's one of only 2 drivers that within the past 3 races he's finished in the top 10 every time. The only other one doing that is Denny Hamlin. But Brad K, though, we have to consider that RFK racing equipment. And not just even that, even dating back to his time in Penske, he's just had a knack for this track and finding his way into the top 10 any way that he possibly can. He's got 5 straight top 10 finishes going into this week's race overall, so he's shown that he's had the consistency overall. He's led laps here and there. RFK, and we have to mention about the Fords just basically getting better and better every week. There's just so many factors in mind. And even when you look towards his price point overall on both DraftKings and FanDuel, he is an easy driver in order to just plug into any lineup at $9K on DraftKings. And then even on FanDuel, he's the exact average at $10K. Absolutely crazy circumstances.
Pricing's way off, in my opinion, for him. So I'm with you. Christopher Bell, look, he's the odds-on favorite. He's running Xfinity. He's the only one that's been like even close to Truex competition-wise. He won 2 years ago. I feel very confident in this group of 4 drivers. I'm not going to lie. If I could find a way to get all 4 of these drivers into a DFS lineup, I would do it. I tried it today. I couldn't do it. I was close. I couldn't do it. So anyhow, and part of it's because Truex is so high priced. You can do it with Brad, Joey, and Bell or Truex, but you can't get the 4th one in there. But
you can get at least 3 out of the 4 in a FanDuel lineup.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you can do both in the DraftKings too. But both of us really like a mid-tier guy where if you use this mid-tier guy, you can have 3 of those 4, this mid-tier guy, and have enough money left over to not just scrape the bottom of the barrel at the value spots. But
yes. So both of us within our particular listing for the mid-tier drivers, we listed Bubba Wallace. Bubba, he's a driver. We mentioned about that paint scheme being very, very awesome looking, but I think what's also awesome is his recent performances at New Hampshire, because within the next-gen era, he's finished in the top 10 within both of the 2 races since 2022. Finished 3rd in 2022, and he finished 8th in last year's race overall. And we know this is a Toyota-based track where Toyota, they've been some of the best performers there, especially if it's a team affiliated with Gibbs like 2311 is. So can't help but mention it, especially at the price point, that Bubba's going to be a driver to watch.
Hamlin also has had a lot of success here. Hamlin's had a lot of success at flat ovals, Martinsville, Richmond. I know they're kind of home tracks for him. He's the owner. I got to believe there's some knowledge, understanding of how the car should feel, what you want to look for, and all that transferring to these guys. And look, Tyler Reddick and Wallace have both been pretty decent overall. Wallace, the better of the 2, to be honest. Wallace has been better here of the 2 drivers, quite frankly. I'll be honest, Sean. I'm going to let you take off on the mid-tier drivers because outside of Bubba Wallace, I really don't like this price. The group in this pricing tier, I really don't like him. Alex Bowman, fine. He's doing double duty. He'll probably be decent enough in a Hendrick car, but Hendrick has not been good at this track. Overall, Byron doesn't have a single top 10. Chase only has 2 top 10s, I believe. Larson is the best of the group. Bowman had 2 top 10s. No, Bowman only had
Elliott
1
has 3 top 10 finishes.
Elliott has 3. Career. Bowman has 1. And Larson is the class of the field here as far as Hendrick goes. I don't think all those top 10s came with Hendrick, to be honest with you. So
only 2 of his top 10s, which is 2 of the 3 races he's been a part of at New Hampshire in Hendrick.
So he's been the best of the class for Hendrick then, which we knew this with this car anyway, right? I'm with Sean. I like the SHR guys. I don't know which way I want to go with it. Again, Sean's point, Ford doing this kind of thing. But give us your mid-tiers, because I'll be honest, Sean, I'm punting here. Give me Bubba Wallace, and outside of that, I don't know I want any part of it.
Well, other than Bubba Wallace, I also have Ross Chastain as one of the drivers that I have my eye on. And particularly, this is more so, he has 2 top 10 finishes and 5 starts at New Hampshire. But also, interestingly enough, in all 5 of his starts, he scored a positive place differential, no matter where he started. And that's something to really note.
Which, in all fairness, as much as this is a short track, Sean, there were over the last few races, both Xfinity and Cup, there were plenty of drivers that moved up 10 to 15 spots. I mean, there was quite a few that it really kind of shocked me, because this track is notoriously difficult to pass on. But if you get to that inside lane, it's easy to get freight trained like we see at Martinsville. I was shocked at that. So I love that call out, because we will want to chase some place differential this week.
Yeah, and Ross has never been a strong qualifier at New Hampshire in particular. The best starting position he's ever captured in a Cup race at New Hampshire is 18th. 18th there, Rich.
Yowzers. So I know you mentioned the Stewart Haas drivers. You're leaning towards Chase Briscoe. I don't disagree. I'm assuming that's probably going to be qualifying dependent for you, though.
It is a little bit qualifying dependent, because I can also make arguments for Noah Gragson based on his performance this year, and also Josh Berry, again, because his short track background and his overall performance this year. But I like Briscoe overall, just because in the 2 races with the next gen car, both of them were top 15 finishes, and he finished 10th in this exact race last year, and he scored positive place differential within the 2 next-gen races at New Hampshire as well for Briscoe.
Good call out on Briscoe. I dig that. On our sleepers and bargains, you know what, Sean? After we've talked about it, I kind of want to make a change to mine, but we'll let you have the thunder on this. Sean's first one here, and I got to give him the hat tap, Todd Gilliland. I didn't really even have on my radar, but his price point is silly low. And considering how he's been running lately in the front row and Ford, what else do you like about Gilliland this week?
I just think overall, when there's not a lot of drivers that really stand out to me overall based on the track history there. But Todd Gilliland, he's a driver that he scored positive place differential on more than one occasion in his top tenure with front row at New Hampshire. And just, this is more so a call out based on how well he's been running at some of these 1 mile flat tracks and just overall this year. And it's actually kind of crazy how good Todd Gilliland has been running in recent races. You want a driver that's able to finish top 20 regardless of track type. Todd Gilliland, he's been doing just exactly that. He's been finishing top 20 in every single race, and until you go back towards Dover back at the tail end of April. Every finish since Dover, top 20 for Todd Gilliland, regardless of track type. It's unbelievable consistency, and he's been really showing his skill set out there. And for the price, I mean, you've got to take that.
It's cheap, man. I mean, like I said, I could easily, because he's a little cheaper than some of the other guys I got, I could easily make that move. All right, so we overlap on one driver. We'll get to him in a minute, because I think he's kind of our free square anyway, Sean. But who's the other driver you're looking at? And again, I know this is all qualifying dependent, but I'm guessing you're expecting this guy to not qualify very well, and so he'll be a decent play this week.
Yeah, and that driver overall is going to be Daniel Hemrick. There's not a lot of drivers that overall you can find that are below that 6K range that really are going to be standout finishers, you could say. But Hemrick is a driver that at least he's proven it this year even that, and we've said it before on this podcast, he can finish races. And that's something that is going to matter, especially when you consider his Xfinity Series history at this track is actually pretty solid. 4 finishes of 12th or better, including 2 top 10 finishes in the last 3 appearances that he's made at this track. I think with Hemrick, the equipment isn't top notch, but he can qualify probably far back enough in order to take advantage of it. And for the price, I'd say you can really punt him and stick him in a lineup and feel okay about it.
The only other one that's kind of below that price point, and I don't have a lot of faith, is Kaz Grala because he's so cheap, similar equipment. But, speaking of, Hemrick drives now for Colleague, but the guy that used to run for Colleague, Haley, is now at Rick Ware. Sean, I don't know about you, but I'm going to keep using him as long as Haley's price is attractive as it is, right? I mean, he is priced up a little bit this week. He's finally over 6,000 at 6,100, but at 6,100, I'm actively looking to put him in line. He's a free square for me, Sean. I'm going to use him until the price makes it prohibitive, or we have a streak of bad luck and losses, so to speak, right? Otherwise, I'll take the licks. Haley, you have a bad race. I don't care. You're my boy. Your price is coming down the following week. I'll put you back in, bro.
That's exactly how I feel with Todd Gilliland, and he's been delivering every week too. Really, Gilliland and Haley are like the two drivers that you can comfortably rely on within the past couple of races.
And I said to you, if I could, I'd go back and put Gilliland in. What I did do for my other two drivers is I went Toyota. I know Eric Jones ran well here last year. It wasn't with Toyota, but he does well. He's been okay this season. I wish he'd get some better equipment than what the soccer club gives him, but it is what it is. John Hunter Nemechek is in the same boat, right? Same team. John Hunter ran very well here in Xfinity. So again, because both these drivers, I feel like, have some success or history here with some success, I'm hoping the soccer club figures it out with Toyota or something, because it's been really frustrating, especially these two names. They're two drivers I had some higher hopes for, and I would want to see them in some better equipment, and we're just not seeing it. Let's talk about some of our bets this week. Shocker, we overlap on like everything again.
And this time, it's literally everything.
Everything, yeah. So Christopher Bell, 4-1 plus 400. Martin Truex, 5-1 plus 500. Because I wanted to keep it a core 4, because Sean was calling me out on making it a core 5. I dropped Hamlin at plus 600, 6-1. I have no problem betting Hamlin, especially at that line. He should be there. Again, it's like I've said the last couple of weeks, I feel like that team is just slightly off a little bit, so I'm waiting. I'm waiting to bet on Hamlin and push him. We were here with Hamlin. We're kind of here now. It's going to get back to here. Just give it some time. So instead of Hamlin, I went Joey Logano at 850, 8.5-1. We've talked about Joey Logano. I highly recommend checking out what I say about him in the article. I'm just kind of feeling it. Neither of us can get away from Brad Keselowski at 12-1, right? Mm-hmm. At plus 1,200. We both feel his price is off on the fantasy books. We feel his odds are off. And I'll be the first to tell you, in my opinion, Logano and Keselowski, those odds will drop after practice and qualifying. I expect both of them to probably come in closer to where Denny Hamlin's at. Sean, hit us with your long shot, because you got a long shot.
Yeah, this long shot is simply based on the history and based on the equipment this team has been performing this year. That's Chase Briscoe. He is 100-1, plus 10,000 in order to outright win. I think overall, I think that's a little bit far-fetched as far as how deep he should be. He should be more realistically. If I was setting the lines, I would say that he should be more like, say, plus 5,000 rather than 100-1. Yeah, because especially when you see that his teammates, Josh Berry and Noah Gragson, are both further up on the betting ladder as it stands overall. And Briscoe's been running about as well as those two at times, if not even better sometimes. And history dictates that Briscoe is the best performing SHR driver at this track in the past. So I got my eye on that.
Hey, for $1, it pays $100. So, I mean, far-fetched or not, I'm with you. We like to talk about the early lines on what's off, right? And I agree with you. I think the Briscoe line is off. I'm with you. I would say 5,500 is much more reasonable. I think that's right. And it's probably a little longer than Bowman's, but I would say in that ballpark makes more sense for me, somewhere around there. So I'm with you. My long shot's Bubba Wallace. It's not that long. It's 40-1. Look, he was third here second or third here 2 years ago. He was top 10 last year. They just haven't had the finishes for the speed they're showing. I'm not a guy that pushes Bubba usually, but I got to tell you, at 40-1, throw a buck on it. I ain't hating it. Just saying.
Yeah, I think for the type of track this is and the equipment, I'd say I that's not a bad call either. I can agree with that one.
I assume after practice and qualifying, he probably drops to plus 2,000, plus 1,800, just a guess. I'm thinking it'll probably be in that ballpark. If I was setting lines, I think that's a much more appropriate line to set for him, is probably between 1,600 to 1,800. Again, I get he doesn't win all the time, but he's shown speed at this track, in this car, driving for Toyota, with the team, all the stuff Sean has shown us and said. So I just think it's off a little bit. Well, let's hit our core DFS picks. Geez, Sean, we overlap again. Surprise.
Big shock. Big shock. All right.
Big shocker.
All right.
Yes.
I'll start us off here, and because mine is the same between both sites, I got Christopher Bell at 11,000 on DraftKings and 13,500 on FanDuel. He's not the most expensive driver on FanDuel, which is interesting to note. But
I did think that was weird.
Yeah. Brad Keselowski at 9,000 on DraftKings, a flat 10,000 on FanDuel. I'm loving the FanDuel price for Brad K, especially. Bubba Wallace at 7,500 on DraftKings and 7,800 on FanDuel. Pretty appropriate price for both sites. And then Justin Haley as basically the value pick of my core four. 6,100 on DraftKings, 4,800 on FanDuel. I think that overall he's the best bang for the buck between all the drivers within that tier. So that's my core four right there.
I went Bell. I could easily go Bell or Truex, right? But on DraftKings, I went Bell, I went Logano, I went Brad K, and I went Bubba Wallace. Look, these are all the same names I keep coming back to this week. We've got a little Toyota, a little Ford mixed in. I think that's a good way to go. If you go this route, you can get Haley and still snag a Priest, a Gilliland, or Eric Jones or something like that. So I feel like this core four leaves you some options to hedge, if you will, or do some other plays. And again, you could easily sub out Bell, Truex, save a little bit of money, that sort of thing. I also found it was weird. Truex was more on FanDuel. So my core four in FanDuel is a little different. I'll explain why. Truex at 14,000, Christopher Bell at 13,500, Kyle Busch at 7,500, and Ty Dillon at 2,500. All right. Ty Dillon is so cheap on the other side on FanDuel. I'm struggling not considering him because I'm with Sean. I think he will be okay. I think he's capable of being in that top 25-ish. And at 2,500, that is so low cheap. I was shocked by that. I went Truex and Bell because they're the most expensive. Okay. So you could easily go, you could change out Busch and Dillon and have 100 different ways to do it. But if you went with, say, Bell, Truex, Larson, Blaney, Logano, Brad Keselowski, because Truex and Bell are so expensive, this gives you some other options. You can go 100 different ways. Kyle Busch has had a good record here as far as racing history. I know they're struggling at RCR, but in all fairness, he's actually been fairly fast. He's been a top 10 car every week. So at 7,500 on FanDuel, I thought that was just so underpriced that it's tough not to use. So Busch and Dillon are my underpriced, way underpriced guys. That gives you the option of pretty much loading your roster with any top-end values that you want, mixing and matching, whether it's Truex, Logano, Bell. You can even throw Hamlin in there if that's your cup of tea. So that's where I'm at for this week's core four.
I don't mind the list there. Kyle Busch is an interesting name. We haven't talked about him much during the show, but I think the history is there overall as it is. It's just a matter of if the equipment can hold up, if he finds trouble on track. It'll be a little bit qualifying dependent on me, but he is a driver that I do have my eye on for the price. He is 7,700 on DraftKings, but that FanDuel price though, my goodness, that is an easy decision that you can consider for even without seeing the qualifying numbers.
And see, Bubba's price so close to Kyle on the other site. You save a couple $100 by going with Bubba. So, that's where kind of the difference is. I'll have to go back and look. I want to say Bubba was more expensive than Kyle on FanDuel,
Bubba
but I
is more
could be wrong.
expensive on FanDuel than Kyle by
That's what I thought.
300.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So that's my logic. And again, when it comes to racing, Sean, I don't mind mixing and matching a little bit because random stuff happens. Again, Kyle, if you bet Kyle Busch as a top 10 last week, you were loving life for the vast majority of that race. He got caught up into something. And that seems to be a common trend lately with Kyle, which is showing on the frustration side where he dumped Ricky and all that. But chasing place differential on DK is going to be a thing this week, Sean. And we got to hit the dominators. And dare I say it, we're probably only going to have 1 or 2 dominators in the race.
Yeah, I certainly think it's possible. We're going to have to pay attention to qualifying to see who gets up in the front, because if it ends up being a Gibbs Toyota that also ends up looking really fast in practice, I mean, we might suddenly have Chalk City to deal with on our hands, and not the kind of chalk that is about place differential chalk. We're talking dominator chalk.
Right. And so the difference is going to be hitting on the place differentials on the non-chalky plays is really what it's going to come down to then. So, hey, we'll have you covered. I'll have the Xfinity article again this week. Sean's got you covered on Cup. We actually get a little breather on time this week because practice and qualifying is the day before the race. So Sean and I actually get to watch, take it all in, listen to the interviews, and comment and write it up after the fact. So looking forward to that. Hey, if you like what you see here, you appreciate what we're doing, please do us a favor. Hit that like, subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Please go to fantasyguru.com. Check out the subscribe button. Check out all the packages. If you're not sure what you want, what sports you want, you know what sports you want, but you know what package you want, hit us up. Hit up support at fantasyguru.com. Sean, it's all I got today. So on behalf of Sean Engel, the man, the myth, the legend, please give him a follow on Twitter at SeanE247. Remember, that's Sean, S-E-A-N. You can find me on the Twitter box machine at Fantasy Bosco. On behalf of us at the Elite Plus platform and fantasyguru.com and Sean Engel, we appreciate you for tuning in. I am Rich Maletto. Till next time. Peace.